I think we're going to go ahead and get started. There still may be people joining us, but hello everyone and welcome to today's session about taking face-to-face forums online. I'm Darla Minnick with National Issues Forums Institute, and we're delighted that so many of you have joined us today. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. We request that you remain muted throughout the session. If you've joined by video, please check the microphone icon on your screen to make sure there's a red line through it. If not, simply click on the icon. You should see the red line that will indicate that you're muted. If you've joined by phone, please mute your phone. We want to hear from you during the session. If you have a question or anything that you'd like to share with everyone, please send it through the chat box. The chat box is the top bubble icon that you'll see on your screen, and we'll spend the last half of the call interacting with you. We are recording this session, and the recording will be available on the NIF website in a couple of days. We'll also follow on with you and send you a copy of the PowerPoint slides that you'll be viewing today. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Betty Knighton. Betty?
Thank you so much, Darla. I'm going to bring you greetings from my home in Charleston, West Virginia. I have a feeling that many of you are joining from your homes, wherever you are today, which includes not only people from the United States, but also from people from other parts of the world. So welcome to everybody. My colleagues and I have been really excited to see not only so many registrations for this particular discussion, but also that there are some that have been very experienced with national issues.
There are some other options, and we'll share the resources of how you can see what's available. So Mark, I don't know if you want to share my.
Okay, I'm going to ask for that to mute. Thanks. We're really interested in seeing people who are new to NIF and people who've been experienced for a long while. We want to learn from all of you and to share with you what we've been learning as well. I have a feeling that one of the reasons why so many people have registered for this discussion today is because of the high interest in replacing in-person discussions that we had planned and had hoped to have in the coming months, and that we aren't able to move forward with at this particular time. And so we're looking for ways to replace those in-person exchanges with ways to discuss the issues that are really impacting our lives all over the world, and yet we can't gather together to talk about them in the way that we would like. But we realize this is not a direct replacement for in-person forums. What we are seeing, though, is that there are some benefits to this kind of face-to-face online exchange that maybe in-person forums don't always provide. And so we're looking for those benefits as well. For example, some people have suggested that that in their communities, people may find that it's a safer space for people with different points of view to come together, perhaps than in person. Sometimes we're able to connect in this way that we can't geographically. And yet we know that not everybody has the same access to the internet that others do. And so we're exploring this as one of many options for people to stay connected and to take the work forward. So what we're going to be doing today is we're basically going to be talking about how to plan to have a deliberative discussion, and we're using Zoom as our platform for this conversation and for the experiments that have been happening around the country. We know there are other platforms that provide video conferencing capacity, and so we're looking at this one because it seems user-friendly, and it's one that many people have been or are becoming familiar with. But in any case, we're really emphasizing today not so much the intricacies and the technological aspects of Zoom as its ability to promote a deliberative discussion online. We're not Zoom experts, but we have learned quite a bit from the work that we've seen in other parts of the country that's going on, and we have shared some practical tips and strategies and resources that we'll tell you more about in the conversation today. We've been learning from several colleagues around the country. On your screen, you can see a list of people that have been part of planning this discussion today, as well as doing some work leading up to it. Some from the National Issues Forum Institute, some from the Kettering Foundation, and some from the network of practitioners around the country that have been trying this in their own communities in Kansas, in Florida, and in Colorado. And we want you to have a chance to hear from them too. We also want to share with you some of the resources and materials that we've developed for those of you who want to try more of this kind of work in the future, that we can support you with some of those materials. As Darla mentioned, the first half of the conversation is going to be about some of the things that we've been learning and some of the materials we've been developing. And the second half will be questions, comments, and insights that you will share. Please remember, as we're going through this, to put your questions in the chat. Alice Diebel is going to be keeping a close eye on those questions, and she'll moderate the end of the webinar where we're able to talk about some of the questions that you have. Okay. Now, I know that for some of you, you're so familiar with National Issues Forums, you could be saying exactly what I'm saying right now. But for those of you who are new, I'll just give you a brief idea of what we mean by National Issues Forums. They're nonpartisan discussions that are organized by people from all walks of life, all across the country, on compelling public issues that we need to talk about in order to be able to make progress. So pretty much any issue that you can think of that has been at the forefront of our concerns about health, about the economy, about safety, about education, a whole range of other issues has probably been developed at one time or another for use in National Issues Forums. Sometimes when we talk about National Issues Forums, we really mean the network, and that includes many of you or all of you. It's a very open network. Everybody is welcome to participate. And it just means connections among colleagues that are trying to help people in their communities talk and work together in deliberative ways on public issues. So all are welcome. By public deliberation, what do we mean? Well, I know you've heard that word a lot in all walks of life, but here we're talking about talking through public issues in a way that allows people to really consider different points of view, to weigh different approaches to addressing a public problem, to consider what trade-offs might be able to be made in order to move in a certain direction, to discover and work through some of the tensions that come with these different goals or different ideas about what to do. And how the National Issues Forum guides are used. Many of you are familiar with the materials that are developed through research and a great deal of public input that are used in National Issues Forums. There are shorter guides, brief versions, there are longer versions of the guides that are used online in ways that we'll show you in a later part of the presentation today. You can adapt and use parts of the guides to promote forum by screen sharing on your computer. Jean will show you more about that in just a little bit. There are also support materials, videos, and questionnaires, and supplementary materials to help those who are convening and moderating the forums. You can find out a lot more about all of that on the National Issues Forum Institute website. Up until recently, a great deal of the activity with National Issues Forums has taken place in person, in communities, on campuses, and in classrooms. But there has also been a strong online component to the work. There's a platform called Common Ground for Action that some of you might be familiar with that is a text-based platform that allows people to deliberate about any of the issues that are a part of National Issues Forums. And now we're turning our attention to opportunities to add to those for face-to-face, voice-to-voice exchanges that are happening in the platform that we're using now in order to try to have a similar experience to what people can have with faces and voices as they look together at an issue in person. So to learn more about how those forums come together, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Patty Deneen.
Thank you, Betty. Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. It's great to see people's faces and to be able to be in touch this way. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I just wanted to say a little bit about convening a face-to-face forum online. In order to do that, you need to have an online platform. And as Betty said, we're using the Zoom platform as an example. There are other platforms. You might find something that you like a little bit better. A lot of people right now are using Zoom to be in touch with friends, family, colleagues, work at home. So if you convene a forum online, it might be possible that a good many of the people in your group are already familiar with Zoom, so that would be a benefit. But you can check out some of the other ones too. Zoom does offer a free version and several other paid for versions. I have, for just my family and friends meeting, just a free version. One of the things that you should know about the free version, first of all, it's very easy to get started, to try out. and you can just start your own meeting by yourself or with one other friend and just experiment with all the settings, try it out, see how it goes. So far, the free version, Zoom limits that meeting to 40 minutes, although there's something recently about them suspending that 40-minute limit for students in school. So you just need to be aware that you might come up against a 40-minute limit on that. And then the next paid version, that's about $15 a month, doesn't have that kind of a limit as far as time goes. Once you have your Zoom or platform account that you're going to use, you can schedule a meeting, which would be a way of scheduling your forum. For Zoom terminology, you're considered the host. You can designate other co-hosts, and it's strongly recommended if one of you is going to be the moderator and actually move people through the issue guide material and discussion online, that you have someone else to be your co-host or co-moderator to manage the technology, watch the chat box. If you're going to show some slides on your screen by sharing the screen or playing a video, it's really helpful to have somebody else who will take care of those details for you. One of the things you might be aware of recently in the news, it's been called Zoom bombing, which is when people have a Zoom meeting of some kind going on, that some uninvited people show up and cause mischief in one way or another. So Zoom recommends a couple of things to keep that from happening. One is to require a waiting room so people are in a separate online space, and then as the host or the co-host, you can let them in when you're ready, and you can be sure they are the people that are invited. Requiring a password so that people, and asking them not to share it with other people on social media and so on. Right now, with the free Zoom version, Zoom has turned those things on, a waiting room and password, as default. So you don't need to do anything. Those things are already part of any meeting that you would schedule. We suggest you start with a small group of participants. That's easier than having a larger group. So even just a handful of people, you can end up with a very nice and satisfying online forum. Once you schedule your meeting, then you can send an invitation by email to your group. And you might also want to include links to materials, whatever issue guide or anything you'd like your participants to look over, a link to the video if you'd like to give them a chance to watch it ahead of time if that's part of your plan. And then we recommend that you send a same day as your forum invite reminder, which would contain the Zoom link that they click on then to enter the forum. You have the ability as a host or co-host or moderator to record your entire forum. If you plan to do that, you might let people know ahead of time that you're planning to record the forum and remind them when the forum starts and let them know the purpose of the recording and any use that it might be put to, just as a courtesy. And now to talk more about the actual moderating and the resources and materials that you might use as part of your forum, I'm going to turn things over to Jean Johnson.
I am now unmuted, right? Yes, welcome to all. I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, here very happy to be with you today. Now, as Betty mentioned, we actually have a group of what I would call Zoom veterans with us today, and they are people who've already tried doing NIF forums on Zoom, and so they're going to be able to answer a lot of your questions that you have about exactly what to do. What I'm going to do is present a plan for doing a forum on Zoom. And I think you should think of it a little bit like you think of a recipe. You probably ought to read it all the way through, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it exactly the way we're presenting it on these slides. If you don't like cinnamon, you don't have to have cinnamon in this recipe. So you want to kind of just get this in their head, and then you can think yourself and you can talk with our veterans later about how you might want to change it and adapt it. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, some things that you need to do and to think about before your forum. So one is, Patty mentioned we recommend that you work with a co-moderator. So obviously you want to identify that person ahead of time, get their agreement. And I suspect you might want to practice some things with your co-moderator ahead of time. So get your co-moderator in place. The second thing is you need to decide whether you're going to use the NIF videos. These are short. If you're not familiar with them, they are great ways to get the people in your forum on the same page, because no matter what you do, not everybody will have read the guide ahead of time. And the videos can be very, very useful in getting people up to speed and giving people some confidence that they can participate in this and really enjoy it. But there are some bandwidth issues. So some of our Zoom veterans have struggled with these bandwidth issues, and so that they can talk you through that. There's also, you want to set up the video in advance. And at the end of this, there's some very good kind of step-by-step, line-by-line instructions for how you set the video up ahead of time, so that when your forum starts, you can be really ready to show it at the right moment. The third thing you want to do is to think through the PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to ask Darla to pull up, this is a sample of the PowerPoint slides. For Zoom NIF forums, we've prepared some slides that you can use. And they run the gamut. You know, there's some information about how to hold a forum. There are some sample guidelines, ground rules for a forum. There are some samples of some of the strategic facts in the guide. There are different ways of presenting the different options. Some of them are very lengthy and detailed. Some of them are quite short, just kind of reminders. So before your forum, you want to go through those. I mean, probably you don't want to show all of them. That would just be a PowerPoint presentation. It wouldn't be a good forum. So you want to pick out the ones that you think will move your group through the issue. You can pick them out ahead of time and just kind of set it up so you know which ones you want to use. I think also you want to think about when you want your slide on the screen and when you want to go to gallery view. That means you want your people on the screen. Because, you know, in a forum, you do want people looking at each other. You want them to kind of become familiar with each other, enjoy talking to each other. And so you want to kind of go back and forth. But there are times when you may want to leave the slide up, has some information people may want to think about, and then you want to go to your gallery view. So think that through ahead of time. The fourth issue to think through ahead of time is how you want your participants to signal that they'd like to say something. And there are basically 4 ways to do it that we have found in Zoom. One is that you do what our participant here in our slide does. You raise your hand, and the moderator sees it and you speak. You can also arrange your forum so people just speak, that you don't have people on mute, or you show them how to unmute themselves, and they speak out themselves. This is very spontaneous. A lot of people like it because it really is like a forum. I think the downsides are that some people who are a little more reserved, perhaps, don't feel as comfortable doing that. Sometimes you have people speaking at the same time. So you need to think through, you know, which is better for you, having someone raise their hand, have them speak out. The 2 other ways to do it are to have people use the chat box. And I can see that a lot of our participants today know exactly what the chat box is. It's great, I think, for if you have a very large forum to have the chat box. But, you know, people do have to know how to use it. They do have to feel comfortable typing their questions. You don't want people to get sidelined with the chat box as opposed to paying attention to the discussion. So some pros and cons there. And then the final way to do it is to use, Zoom has under the participant section, a way that you can raise your hand, the Zoom hand raise. And you can do that. And then the moderator will see that you would like to speak and they can call on you. So the one thing that I think most of our veterans have suggested based on their experience, and what I would suggest based on the ones that I saw, is that you can choose the one you want, but don't mix them. If you mix them, first of all, you're really creating a lot of complication for yourself, because you're going to have to keep track of who's coming from where. But the second thing is, you know, you may have some people using Zoom raising their hand, and so they're on the list, and then somebody else is raising their hand physically. And, you know, this happened, and the rest of us were wondering why the moderator was not calling on this poor guy who was raising his hand. And in fact, he was in the queue, but it wasn't very clear. So it can get very, very mixed up if you try to use all these together. So our suggestion is really to use one of them, particularly when you're starting out and haven't done a lot of them. The fifth one is like going to Carnegie Hall. It's practice, practice, practice. You want to practice playing the video. You probably want to do it with your co-moderator. Make sure the video shows when you want it. Make sure the bandwidth is okay. Make sure the audio is okay. You want to practice showing your slides. So you want to do that ahead of time. And then the last thing you want to do is the one way that I think that a in-person forum really differs from a video forum is you lose that capacity where people have been talking to each other and they walk out to the parking lot together, or they leave the building together and they're still talking. So what do you want to do in the video conferencing that really video forums that really sort of matches that? And some of our Zoom veterans have done this. They have some very good ideas. It's something to talk about later with them. So on the next slide, you're in your video room, and the next slide in your video room. So it's yes. So this is now you've got them there. You've got people are there. So you do want to, as I think Patty was saying, really divide up the labor. So one person is really concentrating on the deliberation and the questioning and the moving things along, and the other person is watching the screen, the chat box. You may want to do Darla right now is sharing her screen, which means I can think about what I'm saying. And so that is really, thank goodness for Darla today, because it really is really helpful to have somebody else worrying about that while you're working with your group. When you start your forum, you definitely want to review the Zoom basics. I don't think I've ever been on a Zoom call where everybody knew where the gallery view is. So you want to work the people through, show them where that is, make sure they know how to do it, make sure people knew mute and unmute, know how to do it so they're comfortable doing that. You do want to explain whatever method you choose for having people participate, raising your hand, whatever it may be, explain that ahead of time. And I would ask people to stick just to that one method for this forum. So, because it really will help you kind of focus on the what's happening in the forum and not so much on traffic essentials. And if you're recording, I think it's a nice idea to remind people of that. There's based on what I have seen, once people start wrestling with the choices and talking to each other, you really are getting into the meaty part of a NIF deliberative forum. And, we've had some very good experiences with it. We're quite upbeat about the capacity of people to talk to each other and listen to each other online. It seems to actually work very well. So, you want to get the introductions and the ground rules out. Have people tell their personal stories and incorporate that into your forum, work through the options, make sure you cover all the options, really have people wrestle with these risks and trade-offs and listen to each other, and then to gather your reflections at the end. And then afterward, you want to think through how to keep people in touch with each other, whether you want to build in some additional activities or additional meetings for people to keep talking. And I think one of the benefits of using video is that you have everybody's emails. That's often not the case in an in-person forum. You're going to have their emails. You can keep in touch with them, invite them to your next forum, invite them to discuss the issue further, and kind of build up a really good group of people who are interested in deliberating more with their neighbors in their towns and across the country. So now we are going to turn to some questions and get your ideas and your thoughts about this. Some of you may have some experience yourselves you want to bring to the table. So my colleague, Alice Stiebel, is going to take it over from here.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be with you. And thanks, Jean and Patty and Darla and Betty. We took down the slides and we'll just unmute the people we are going to have speak. We have 3 partners in our network who have actually been experimenting with Zoom face-to-face online NIF forums. And we want to hear from them first. And I've been capturing your questions, and then we'll turn to those. And they may answer some of your questions in their comments. But I just want to ask our 3 experimenters, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to ask you to describe blow by blow everything that you did, but just trying to address a few of the things that we think people will find most interesting. So I'm going to ask Martine Carcassonne to come on first. He's in Colorado at Colorado State University. And if you could talk briefly about what your students are learning about deliberation in this face-to-face forum. We've had a few questions in the chat about working with students, so we think that will be of interest. And then I know you used chat in a different way than maybe what we've described. And also a brief mention of breakout rooms. We've had some questions about using breakout rooms for larger groups. So I'm going to ask Martine to come on.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. Yeah, so we've done a few of these that we try to kind of, as much as possible, recreate what our normal events are with the Center for Public Deliberation, which is a larger group meets, and then at some point, you know, we send people to small groups. So we did use Zoom with the breakout groups for that. You know, I think we normally had around 35 or 40 kind of join initially, go through the ground rules, go through the explanation of Zoom and those type of things, and then use the breakout feature, which worked really well. I saw some conversation on the chat about the co-hosts. The co-hosts work in a couple different ways on Zoom. I won't get into the technical aspects of it, but to set a co-host beforehand, they actually have to pay and be a part of it. But actually during the event, you can make co-hosts. So I was able to make all my students co-hosts, so that when they're in the breakout room, they have the power to mute all, which is wonderful. I wish we had that in face-to-face groups. And you know, they can remove someone if they need to. They can share their screen and those type of things. But you do have to turn that on through Zoom. That's not a default thing. But if you go into settings, so the co-hosts help. Yeah, we thought through the way we played with the chat. You know, with this larger group, you know, obviously we're having a different conversation on chat. People are kind of going back and forth and answering each other, which would be useful. With the smaller group, we didn't really want that. We didn't want a separate conversation on chat. We wanted everyone to focus on the conversation. But we like the functionality of having chat. You know, say if I was going on and talking for a while, if someone had a question and wanted to push back on something I would say, they would either have to interrupt me, which might be, you know, a little bit more difficult online than it is face to face. People can't see the nonverbals. You know, so we encourage people, like, use the chat if you have a question or a follow up or those type of things. But then we told them don't answer each other on chat. Right? So we did have the luxury of having two facilitators in each of the breakouts. So as we saw in the chat, you know, one person was focused on the conversation. The other facilitator was cutting and pasting the questions or parts of the issue book, but also keeping an eye on chat. But then we wanted to bring anything in the from chat into the conversation. So once there was a break, they might say, well, you know, there was a question on chat there to bring it, you know. So we try to use chat as kind of a supplemental thing, but not a separate conversation. And that worked pretty well. But we did find when we actually had the forums, people didn't use the chat that much, at least in the smaller groups. We tried to keep the groups pretty small. I think we had maybe 8 or 9 people in each of the breakouts once we went out to breakout.
Great, thank you. We've had some people ask about what CGA is. That's Common Ground for Action. That's not a video-based online forum, but that's text-based. And as we move through some of these questions, I think I'd like to come back. We've had some questions in the chat about it too, about combining Zoom and CGA. So we'll come back to that. That's a more complex kind of question. I do want to address a couple of things that showed up in the chat. People have asked if these slides from this presentation will be available, and yes, they will be. I also want to ask Darla if we can copy the chat and send it out along with the slides to everybody, because people are making lots of great suggestions.
Yes, we can do.
Great, thank you. There was some discussion about the cost of Zoom and how pricing might be better for public institutions like libraries and that sort of thing. And making co-hosts and those sorts of things. So I'm going to move on to another one of our presenters. That would be Lissa Staley from Topeka, Kansas, if you're on. And Lissa, if you're not, you might want to recommend someone from your team if you're not interested in talking. Let us know. You. I wanted to ask you, what was your experience with having diverse participation in your online forum? And the second question I would ask is, you live in an area that has lower bandwidth. How did that affect your forum? Were you able to use a video? And the third question, how did you manage turn taking?
All right, for diverse participation.
I think we just muted Lissa by accident.
Better? For diverse participation, we reached out to people specifically in an effort to get more different people in our deliberations. We're at a public library, and so we reached out both to library staff and library board members, and that helped us actually reach more different kinds of people. We were doing the healthcare deliberation, and lots of us have library insurance, but then it turns out there's lots of variations among life experience there still. So I felt like we were able to get, by targeting who we invited, we were able to get a good spectrum of people. All of our deliberations were pretty small, 10 or less. What was your second question, Alice?
Sorry, I was muted. The second question was lower bandwidth.
Oh, yes.
With that, and did you use video?
We did not try to show the video because I had tried to do a online trivia night event already for work using Zoom and had trouble with the video there. So I didn't try it with this. So we talked through and we used those great slides that Darla has created. That was amazing. That really helped us to focus. And I think it also helped us focus and slow down throughout to stop and look at slides before we moved on. And your third question was about participation. We did a lot of pretend we're at a table. Look at people's faces. This is about us talking to each other. So when people wanted to speak, they signaled. It was a little challenging because we had several people at each deliberation using phones to participate. So I knew they couldn't, especially towards the end of the series we did, I knew they couldn't see everyone else signaling. So I got better in my intro at saying, some of you are having this experience and some of you are having this experience. So I may call on you if it looks like you're trying to signal because you can't see that everybody else is signaling. I got better at explaining to people that I knew they all had different things going on, even if I couldn't simulate their experience for myself.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else on your team that you want to have share on those questions? Or?
I think that Marie is on the call, but I don't know if she has more to share or not.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you can go ahead and indicate in the chat, Marie, if you want to add to what Lissa had to say. There are lots and lots of comments here about some of the functions of Zoom and things like beyond screen sharing. If you're going to share a video, there's embedded when you share a little checkbox that says you're going to play something through your computer. And if you don't do that, it's much harder to hear and see the video. So we're not going to get into too many technical details on Zoom, but we will have a handout for you that has a lot of this stuff in it. And as I said, we'll share the chat box because people are helping each other out a lot with these kinds of questions here. And I'm going to turn next to Greg Kaufman from Florida. Yes, Greg is here. All right. You have a lot of experience with face-to-face forums, Greg, and I'm wondering if you found that people were deliberating online as well as they do when they're face-to-face, or what you did to encourage deliberation. The second part of the question would be, how did you manage reflections and follow-up practices? And we had some questions about note-taking, and I know you have some thoughts about that too.
Well, hello, everyone. It's great to see so many people and a lot of friends over the network here. We had a forum a couple weeks ago, and we had 11 participants and several observers, and everyone that participated, it was their first deliberative forum. I don't belong to a center or a library or any kind of an institution. I'm simply a individual practitioner in the NIFI network, and basically I reached out to friends. I found that in terms of encouraging people to participate, I found it a little bit easier to bring diverse ideas as I was able to identify friends that I knew had conservative viewpoints or were more moderate or maybe more progressive. So I felt that I had a little bit more control over convening the forum. And that turned into a real plus because I felt people were quite deliberative. We had some certainly differences of opinion, but people did a really good job of responding to one another, kind of across the political divide, let's say, and do a good job at listening and rephrasing and yet suggesting their own ideas. So I felt quite good about the deliberative nature. I will say that we scheduled 2.5 hours, so we functioned just like an in-person forum. So that, and people just were able to take the time to do it. We did it from 6 until 8:30 in the evening. We did have a designated note taker, and at the end of each option, she simply held up a piece of paper. Actually, it was cardstock with Sharpie notes on it, and she did a little nice summary of the highlights of each of the options. We had plenty of time to do reflection, to reach some areas of common ground. And in fact, one of the people that he was the first to speak and self-identified himself as a contrarian and a conservative. At the very end, he said, I was really surprised with how much I agreed with. And so he was just a great person. He happened to be my neighbor, across the street. We also had time to debrief, to ask people what they felt good about, what we could have done better. And there were a lot of really nice comments. People felt that they were kind of establishing community, and we had a nice range of ages of people, so that was good. So those are the highlights quickly of our experience.
I want to keep with you for a minute, Greg, if you don't mind. There have been several questions about sort of what happens in the parking lot after the forum. You know, people tend to continue their conversations after the forum in the parking lot, but here we had a online version. How are you handling that?
Well, we simply encourage people to stay. I must say that we also designed a break into the forum. So at the end of option 2, we had a restroom break. But during that time, several people simply wanted to stay and chat with one another. There were some people that knew each other, and so that was kind of nice. Yeah, the parking lot, the post conversation, people said that they would really like to do this again. They'd like to get together with the same group. They felt they established some relationship with one another, and you know, we just finally arrived at 8:30 and a time to leave. And I said that I would send everyone a post-forum questionnaire that they could fill out on their own. And so they did that. I will mention, by the way, that we did embed the video in our little PowerPoint. And even though we had people in rural Virginia and Kentucky and other areas, we had no problem with the bandwidth. People seemed to receive it very well.
Great, thank you. We've got lots of questions about the feature within Zoom called Whiteboard. And anytime you use any of these features that take up the screen, like we're doing here by spotlighting the speaker's video, you can't see the faces of everybody else. So these are trade-offs you need to consider when you do your form. If you want your note taking done on a whiteboard, it's going to be visible and you won't be able to see people's faces. But there are things available within Zoom like a whiteboard feature that you can use. It looks like Lori Britt has something on notes. She says you can use the Google Doc. So I guess you would open a Google Doc in a separate window or share the screen. And again, I think when you are taking notes in that way, you just have to weigh how much of that you want visible to the participants in the in the forum. We've had lots of comments. Oops. Sorry about that. Never fails. We've had lots of comments about having people observing your forum and not participating, but participating as observers. And some people prohibit that, and other people will allow it, but under certain conditions. And I'm trying to think who would best answer answer that question. Greg has his hand up. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, we had actually 3 people from Kettering, 2 journalists, and then a fellow at Kettering. I had them introduce themselves. We did a separate round of introductions, simply asking people with their name, where they lived, and what their occupation was, or maybe what they previously did if they were retired. And that was in addition to the personal stake. So we took some time to do that. And it was during that time that our observers introduced themselves and a little bit of what they did. So, and we asked people if for agreement to be recorded. But we wanted to make the observers work accessible, and that people knew that they were listening in.
We're also getting some questions about what to share in terms of the slides. If you upload those ahead of time, or if you upload the video ahead of time so people can look at those sorts of things. That's all possible, all good ideas. And it looks like perhaps Martine has some comments on the anonymity of people participating.
No, I was just saying, you know, it's nice that you have everyone's name right in front of you, but we had a couple of situations when we did our public ones that the name on the screen wasn't their actual name because it was their spouse's name or something like that, whoever Zoom account they were using. So we often just kind of, especially as we're going through introductions, if something was off there with a name, we just had to show them how to change their name on it. You know, which you just pull up the participant list, they right click their name, and they can change their name. One reason that's important facilitation wise is we kind of went through these. You know, we did, now generally the CPD kind of, we train our students to be a little bit more active facilitators than the general within IF, you know, asking a lot more probing questions and you know, bringing out tensions and so forth. But we found with the online one, we even had to do that a little bit more. That, you know, some people aren't comfortable just talking over people and those type of things. So we ended up calling people out a little bit more, or if we, even for the introductions, you know, we instructed our facilitators to actually walk, you know, call people out, you know, walk through that because it's just harder. You don't have the nonverbal cues. The facilitator tends to name people by name to kind of bring them in a little bit more than they would on a face-to-face thing. So having the names right certainly helps.
Yeah, and someone else made the comment about reducing people coming in that you're not anticipating coming in. So that's another thing you can do by not sharing the link broadly. I think that was addressed early in this presentation, and we address it in the handouts that we have for you as well, by having an invitation that people only get the link to the online forum after they've responded to your invitation, rather than publicizing it broadly for the whole world to see. And Jean, I think, has observed some of our experiments and forums actually through the years, and I think could make some comments about observation.
Yeah, I'm usually in the position of being the observer, and I think that for Kettering or for NIF, because we're so interested in what people are saying across the country and whether these forums are helping them, and you know, it's a way we can learn and improve what we do. I always introduce myself because I just think you need to reveal that you're there and not be kind of anonymous. And the other point I always make is that what they say in this forum is only for the people in the forum. And if we were to write about the forum, we would say, a person from Topeka, Kansas said, but we would never use anybody's name or quote them by name. And I always reassure people of that. And, people are generally actually quite, grateful that we're going to be covering what they say and working with it at Kettering and at NIF and occasionally in Washington in briefings, and that what they say may actually have some impact beyond that. So you usually get a very, very nice reception if you're upfront about what you're doing and you're clear about it.
Thank you, Jean. I'm not sure if we've answered this question fully, but it came up a little bit later in the chat. I know we talked about it at the beginning about facilitation techniques and turn taking and that sort of thing, but I'm wondering if there's anything that's especially important for that facilitation that plays out differently online than it does in person. And maybe Lissa or Greg could take that up.
I think in some ways I had to work harder to help people imagine themselves around a table together, but really that was the work I felt like I was doing, and they did a good job of talking to each other. Anytime it was too much like they were talking just to me, I would sort of redirect them to each other or ask those questions that built on each other. I just spent a lot of time helping connect, trying to build that environment of we're all around this table together, even though obviously we were not. Reminding people to look at faces, calling out people's facial expressions, highlighting those human things I wanted them to be experiencing. That's really where I leaned because I wanted them to talk to each other as much as possible.
Thank you. Someone else asked a question about hand raising. There is a process that you can use if you want to for people to raise hands, but it's one more window for you to watch, which is why we've already got a couple moderators going on. But if you go to the Manage Participants box in the bottom of your screen, that's the place where an individual can raise their hand, and people will queue up for the host in the order they raise their hands. So that can be useful, but again, it's another window to watch. Let's see, someone else just posed a question, and I'm not sure we can really answer this question, but I just want to put it out there because I know it's an important one. Is there anyone who's been doing forums in areas with really heavy losses? So how can we have trauma-informed deliberation? So the people in this region are dealing with heavy casualty and illness, and the idea of engaging in deliberation right now is more challenging. And I would just say, yeah, I think you have to decide what it is you want to talk about online and what it is that you feel is not where people are right now. So you may want to do some concern collecting, those kinds of things, rather than jump right into an NIF forum right now. So I appreciate that question a lot. And I think this might be a good time to go to, let's see, what's this question? Looking at the camera. That's a point. Yes, we have some of that stuff in the handouts that we're going to give you. And I wanted to give Martine a chance to talk about something a little more complicated. He has used Zoom and Common Ground for Action together, and maybe you could talk about what you've learned from that experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of what we've been thinking through as we develop kind of our online facilitation kind of style in a sense is, so what does the online give you that you can't get from face to face, right? So both with CGA, there's some chat earlier about using the poll function on Zoom, which is another one of those things you can turn on in settings, and it is kind of part of the regular Zoom. That allows you to kind of get a quick kind of anonymous reading of the entire room or entire group without having to do a hand vote or things like that. So that's been pretty helpful. So we have used CGA with the Zoom, which makes CGA a lot easier because you can kind of talk everyone through the different parts, not having to read the different steps you're having to kind of go through. So it made it a lot quicker. But then if you're familiar with CGA, everyone kind of ranks different actions and the approaches. And it gives you a graphic representation of both how much agreement there is, agreement or disagreement within the group, but then also how much support or don't support specific actions. So for facilitators, it gives you really interesting information to be able to dig into, whether you decide to focus on where they agree potentially play devil's advocate, or you're focusing where they disagree and bring that out. So I think we've done CGA without the video and with the video, and my students very much thought, even though a little bit, higher tech expectation to be able to manage kind of both Zoom and CGA at the same time, they felt that the combination worked really well. And basically, we start Zoom, and I think we primarily use Zoom just for the audio. If people are tech savvy enough to do a split screen or have two screens, whatever, maybe they have one screen with a video and one with CGA. But I think most people were just on CGA the whole time. We just kind of had the audio link through Zoom to be able to talk through things, and dig more into the specific actions.
Thank you. So a combination of some analysis as well as some good discussion. Let's see, lots of tools are showing up in the chat, and we're going to turn to some tools in just a minute. One other question that I don't think we talked about, although I think we talked about it early in the presentation, is how many people should you let into a Zoom, a Zoom forum? And Martine talked about that too with the breakout sessions. If you have a big group, you can sometimes break them into smaller groups. But we have found that if you can see everybody's faces on one screen, that's probably a good way to watch people's body language as best you can, turn taking by having people raising their hands and those sorts of things. We are asking someone to run a poll. I think that might have to be set up in advance, and I don't know how to do that, and that's a very techie question. So I think we might hold that unless someone can give a really quick answer to how to run a poll. I know that can be done, but yeah. Martine would be my best on that.
Well, I mean, I think you have to turn that feature on before the call starts. I don't think you'd be able to do that right now. So if you go, to regular Zoom where you have your account, you do settings, it has lots of different options, including adding the breakout, and once you turn on the polling, the breakout groups, and those type of things, it just gives you, the little marker where it has the managed participants and the chat and the share screen. It keeps on adding additional things like that. But I don't think you can do it in the middle of a call.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. So, okay. And again, as we mentioned before, there are other platforms you can use besides Zoom. And someone mentions Meeting Sift that has great polling capacities. At this point, I think I have worked through the questions that I have. I don't think anybody's on the phone. Brad, if someone's on the phone, do you want to unmute them and see if they have questions? But I didn't see anybody on the phone. And if that's the case, I'm going to ask Darla to share the screen again, and we'll look at some of the resources we have available. And Darla or Betty, could you talk through this slide a little bit?
I think Darla's going to talk about this one, and I'll do the next one.
Okay, thank you, Betty. So to help you get started, we prepared some materials that expand upon what you've heard today, such as tips for convening and moderating a face-to-face online forum, some technical basics, and these documents focus on some of the tips that we've discovered while using Zoom in practice forums. We're not endorsing Zoom, and we certainly hope these tips will apply to other platforms, and I like to think of them as living documents. We will continue to enhance them with new tips as we hear from people. And as I shared earlier, I shared a few slides from the PowerPoint template that was created with elements from the issue guide for healthcare. We also have a slide deck for a house divided. We talked a little bit about Zoom bombing, so there's a link to a piece that was posted in New York Times that'll give you some more details on how you can avoid that. We have a wealth of information on moderating on our website. And since so many people join from higher education, we put a link into some deliberative pedagogy material we thought that would be of interest. Anytime you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I mentioned, oh, and then for CGA platform, if you have any questions about that or are interested in getting started, please contact Kara Dillard. She's our specialist. She'll be able to help you out. We will be following on with a copy of the PowerPoint slides, so you'll have direct links to the materials. It's work in progress. We'll have a direct link to the materials on our homepage in a day or so, and we'll also have a recording of today's session available as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to Betty.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Darla. I just want to go back to where we began this call, which was talking about what do we mean by national issues forums. You can see it can mean a particular process of bringing people together to deliberate. Sometimes people refer to a set of materials that are part of the National Issues Forum resources that we can offer. I usually think of National Issues Forums as this network of people who grow and expand their learning by opportunities to connect with one another. And so that's why we really want to emphasize the staying connected part of this. Already from your questions, from the experiences of our colleagues around the country, and from what I'm learning as I'm reading through the chat comments, we still have a great deal to learn from each other in this and a lot of the other common interests that we share. So I would encourage all of you, whether you're new to NIF or very experienced, if you could continue to share your insights with us, stay connected with us, because they're integral to how we're going to learn and grow and expand our idea of building capacity for people to be able to have these kinds of experiences in their own schools and in their own communities. We'll be sharing the resources, as Darla said. We'll be updating them constantly as we hear and learn more from you. And we're also in the process of creating some new issue guides that we want to just briefly make you aware of. Somebody asked the question about putting these conversations in the context of what we're all experiencing with the coronavirus pandemic. My sense is that pretty much any issue that you'd be talking about right now, the existing NIF issues would all be impacted by and informed by people's experiences right now with the corona pandemic in their community and how that's impacting the issue at hand. We're also developing new materials to talk about economic recovery as we have opportunities to turn our attention toward that in the future, about opportunities for youth and how that is impacted by our current situation, and on voting. Those are all going to be available in the next few months over the course of the summer and the early fall. So we'll stay connected with you about that as well, and really want to hear your insights about what's happening in your own communities related to those issues. So please stay connected. We'll be hearing more from you, we hope, in the coming weeks and months about the work that you're doing. You'll be hearing more from us right away because we're going to start sharing some of these resources with you. And just thank you so much to those who've shared their experiences, for my colleagues with National Issues Forums and the Kettering Foundation, and for all of you who participated today. It's been really wonderful to spend an hour together, and we hope we'll meet again very soon.
Eddie, one quick comment. We have people from all over the world on this call today, so I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and with that, we'll say goodbye for now and see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.